Next on the agenda is the presentations. The first presentation will be on the national policy and priority projects, and this will be ably delivered by our colleague, or my colleague at the Ministry of Finance, Directorate of Public-Private Partnership, Ms. Ndey. I know she's a bit nervous, but she can do it. And that's the one.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Ndey and I work for the Ministry of Finance as the Principal Economist for the Directorate of Public-Private and Partnership. My presentation this morning, will be on the national policy, identifying the key priority projects that has been screened for potential implementation within the short term. The outline of my presentation would include the background, definitions of public-private partnerships, the policy objectives, benefits of PPP. I would present to you the institutional framework, and also identifying the selection of fast-tracked PPP projects and priority sectors, and a summary of my presentation. I'll give you a brief background of the PPP framework, given its importance and relevance within the National Development Agenda. Given that PPP has been in high demand not only in the Gambia but in a lot of developing countries, the demand for infrastructure has been growing faster than available funding. Most governments, like the Gambia and in most developing countries, are looking for more innovative ways of financing infrastructural projects. And PPP has been one of the key frameworks that is being explored as a framework to finance for sustainable development. The adoption of the public-private partnership framework has been reflected in government's desire to improve the quality and cost effectiveness and timely provision of public infrastructure in the Gambia. I'll give you a brief definition, even though there has been a number of definitions of PPP, but according to the policy document, a public-private partnership is a contractual arrangement between a public entity and a private sector party with clear agreement on shared objectives for the provision of public infrastructure and services traditionally provided by the public sector. Why do we need the PPP policy? We have an approved policy of the public-private partnership, but it has not been really put out there for the stakeholders and the general public's information. So the policy document is a very important document that is developed to create a sound enabling environment for infrastructure investments, also to encourage and promote private sector participation in delivery of public infrastructure and services in ensuring that existing infrastructure is upgraded and new infrastructure is developed. Also, why we need the policy document is to provide a clear and consistent process for all aspects of PPP project development and implementation, from project identification, appraisal, procurement, operations, maintenance, and performance monitoring and evaluation. The objectives of the policy document includes, but is not limited to, the following. Basically, to leverage public sector assets and private sector resources. Also, the policy is aimed at encouraging and facilitating investments from the private sector. Also, to improve the quality of public services, such as water, sanitation, transportation, electricity, amongst others. Also, the policy aims at ensuring that compliance is adhered with both social and environmental standards. In addition to that, it is aimed that the PPP policy would protect the interests of all stakeholders, be it public sector, private sector, and also the national citizens themselves. In addition, it is envisaged that the PPP policy would set up an efficient and transparent institutional arrangement which I will present to you later, and also a framework for developing efficient risk-sharing mechanisms and promote Gambian participation within the PPP framework. The guiding principles and I would say the attributes of PPP. To have an effective PPP framework, you need to assess the project and ensure that it has value for money. Also, risk allocation, and this is basically to ensure that risks are allocated to the party that is best in the position to manage the risk. For example, if the private sector has resources in terms of funding, human capital, we would allocate that responsibility to the private sector to improve efficiency and more effectiveness. Ability to pay, also local content and technology transfer. It is also envisaged that as part of the attributes of PPP should include safeguarding the interests of the general public and consumer rights. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the PPP should be in the position to ensure that the environmental standards, climate and social concerns are safeguarded. Also, it has to have clear objectives and output requirements. Accountability, transparency, and competition should also be part of this framework. Government support, what is expected from the government of the Gambia in this process? A lot of incentives will be expected to be provided by the government of the Gambia, and this would include project development facility, viability gap funding, infrastructure financing, and other incentives such as tax holidays, duty waivers, amongst others, to encourage private investments within the public, to basically provide public infrastructure and public services. The institutional framework, as highlighted within the policy document, recognizes the importance of an efficient institutional mechanism and therefore has identified the Ministry of Finance as the most suitable institution to lead the PPP agenda. So this agenda is being implemented currently by the Public-Private Partnership Department, and amongst its responsibilities will include the following. The first one is policy development and dissemination, which is what we are talking about at the moment. Also, as part of its mandate, they are to create awareness and interest of public, or interest in PPP in line with the development agenda. Also, the unit is expected to provide advocacy on PPP framework, as well as leadership in pioneering PPP initiatives. They are expected to identify high-value PPP projects, which I will present some of the 10 priority projects that have been identified for implementation within the short term. They would also monitor and evaluate existing and new projects to ensure quality control and standardization. In addition, the unit is expected to work with stakeholders like the Chamber of Commerce and hold policy dialogues like the one we have on today, as well as engage the MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies, train them on the PPP framework, the legal framework, and other relevant areas that needs more capacity building. In addition to that, the unit is expected to provide financial management support of funded and contingent liabilities, as well as the legal framework to ensure that PPP laws are in line with the investment laws of the Gambia. Within the institutional framework and to support the work at the level of the ministry, the government of the Gambia has identified cabinet to basically review PPP proposals with concessions of over 5 years or more, involving investments of up to $3 million US. In addition to that, there is an approval committee that was set up within the policy document, and this committee should have representations from the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Trade, the Gambia Investment and Export Promotion Agency, Gambia Procurement Authority, PPP Secretary, the PPP department should serve as the Secretariat and the Ministry of Finance as the chair. However, recent developments have occurred, and the tender board has been identified, has been set up recently, and part of their mandate is to carry out or review PPP proposals of up to 10 million and above. I think my colleague lawyer would elaborate on that in his presentation. Also, part of the mandate of this committee is to approve large PPP projects and associated documents. Also, approve the sector policies and model contracts. Also, approve the user levies and settlements of dispute related to the user levies. Make recommendations of legislative and regulatory changes, and also provide general oversight of the procurement, implementation, management of PPP in the Gambia. In addition to that, there are key institutions who has basically got key responsibilities to contribute to the PPP framework. Some of these would include the new Ministry of Planning and Policy, who is responsible of preparing the National Infrastructure Plan, and also approve projects initiated by procurement authorities that are not covered within the Priority Action Plan or the National Infrastructure Plan. These should be in line with the National Development Agenda if it's the PAGE or the PAGE Successor Program. In addition, the Ministry of Justice also has a role to play in ensuring that the existing legislation, there's existing legislative and regulatory environment. The Ministry of Justice would work with the legal team of the Ministry of Finance to ensure that all laws pertaining to PPPs are in line with the laws of the Gambia. In addition to that, the contracting authority and the line ministries would also have a role to play, and part of this role would involve preparing economic appraisals, presenting the rationale of PPP procurement. For example, if you have a PPP project that is under the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Energy would be the responsible authority to do the economic proposal, appraisal, also justify why it is that we need a PPP within the energy sector. There are other institutions or departments within the Ministry of Finance, such as the Loans Department, the Debt, Gambia Procurement Authority. They all have a stake in this within this framework. I would present to you some of the projects that were identified. A study was done in 2014 by the World Bank with the support of PIAF, and they were able to screen and identify at least 10 potential projects to be implemented within a short term. So these 10 projects were identified and screened, and the process of this identification involved 2 stages, one of which was the development of the project, and the second was an assessment of value for money assessment for the implementation of the project. Some of the sectors that were identified for these projects were range from electricity to ferry services, water supply, roads, ports, telecommunications, health sector, agriculture, urban services, and sports. Within these identified priority sectors, there have been some projects either ongoing or to be implemented. So within the transport sector, there are projects such as the Trans-Gambia Bridge, also road maintenance area concessions. Within the transportation, also you have Banjul Barra Bridge, also concession ferry operations, and the port terminal. Within the telecommunications, there are some projects that are identified, such as the National Data Center and GAMSwitch. The agricultural sector, you have development of agricultural value chains, electricity generation, and then other projects. A lot of events have occurred over the past. For example, this GAMSwitch project, which was identified as one of the priority projects, but is already up and running. And lately, we were able to secure some funding under the UNDP. I think it's a tune of about $120,000 to support the full feasibility study for the electricity. We have also secured some funding, about $130 from the Africa Legal Support Initiative. So we were able to secure about $130,000 also to conduct the full feasibility study. Actually, for the National Data Center, we were able to secure $350,000 from the Africa Legal Support Facility and $120,000 from the UNDP. So work has already started in terms of conducting the full feasibility and pre-feasibility as well as the full feasibility studies. And we're hoping that we'll be able to secure more funding either from the support partners or other organizations or even the private sector to support successfully implementing some of these projects. I thank you for your attention.